Hello, this is Danny Raymond, the voice behind Ray's Guy. I'm still traveling, so I'm not in my usual location, so the sounds might be a little more echoey and even have some fan noise as the heater's running here. I'm at a little over 7,000 feet elevation in northern Arizona. We had 3 inches of snow last night, late winter storm. So I'm kind of waiting here until the afternoon to make sure roads are clear and things have melted off. But it gives me a chance to look at this letter from the chairman that came out yesterday. A very interesting one. It's more of a corporate reorganization statement layered upon some tidbits, very juicy tidbits about the technological direction of Star Citizen. Now, I'm going to start, though, with thinking about 4 different types of fans or content creators specifically, and because each of us are going to be reacting to this from our own frame of reference. I'll make no bones about that myself. Type 1 content creators are, let's call them fans. Board gamer is probably the most popular that I would put in this category. They are enthusiastic about the project and tend to view everything in a very positive light. Also very close, but a little bit more towards the center from board would be the Eradicator, who my impression is he loves to like games. So for example, his Starfield coverage was a bit more generous than most other content creators covered Starfield. Second comes in as what we called it the skeptics. This is where I put myself at. I would also put Salty Mike in this category. At least Salty Mike's more recent works, not when he actually got the nickname Salty Mike. I feel, I'm going to just talk for myself, that from a standpoint of lack of anything else, journalistic ethics, we have to look at corporate announcements like this through a lens of skepticism. Now, one step below is a judgment. The third category is what you might call complainers. Grumpy Eye is a very popular Star Citizen content creator in this category. Their frame of reference is usually to look at something to complain about. Not because they actually like it, but they are necessarily more skeptical than the people in the second category. But it's their nature. It's the kind of content they like to create. I don't like being complaining, but I just feel that there's a certain amount of skepticism is needed for journalistic ethics. And then the fourth category are the people who are just bought into the idea that Star Citizen has to be a scam, and so everything is viewed through that lens as how does it show that Star Citizen really is, a scam or fraud, etc., etc. They might say that they want the game to succeed, but I think they'd actually be happier if they had the ability to even more so say, "I told you so." So, looking at those 4 categories, because I'm going to be referencing them later in my thoughts about this letter from the chairman. So the first thing it starts off is 2023 marked the beginning of a transformative chapter of Cloud Imperium in both of our games. Again, interesting. They're considering both of our games that they are co-equal games is the impression that is intended to give. It basically goes into a bit of the history from this year. Most of this is familiar to us, but it's a fairly good, optimistic take on 2023 went. The launch of Alpha 3.18 was far more challenging than he anticipated, which is kind of an understatement, but at least it's honest. They're admitting that. Our journey reflected a series of significant milestones last year, all of which took center stage at CitizenCon 2953. The magnitude of this event for everyone at CIG cannot be overstated. And I think that's really a fairly accurate description. I was there, and there was a great sense of excitement, both from everyone at CIG and from all the attendees. The other major milestone of 2023 was welcoming the team at Turbulent fully into the CIG family. This is the start where we know we're pivoting into what I think is the core of this, which is an announcement of a corporate restructuring. As part of this acquisition, we gained two key senior executives, Benoit Bosanjour, the Chief Technical Officer of Turbulent, who now became the CTO of Cloud Imperium and the head of our core technology group. So that is important. Corporate technology officer, corporate executive officer, corporate operating officer, these are the highest level of management in a U.S. corporation. Generally, something that starts with chief and officer means that they're listed on the corporate paperwork. They're listed on the SEC filings and stuff. The second key executive director is Marc Baudet, who was CEO of Turbulent and became our Senior Vice President of Studio Operations. Senior Vice Presidents, this is, you might think in terms of political structure, the Vice President is next to the President, which is the second most important person in U.S. government, but that's not the case in corporate governance. In corporate governance, there are lots of vice presidents who are underneath the president who may not even exist. So these are operational officers and are given the title of president or vice president because it sounds important, and it is important. You're not junior officers by any stretch of the imagination, but most corporations have many, many vice presidents. Now, so what's more important is the new chief technology officer, because that means he's in what would be typically termed the C-suite. That's what the term, if you heard that term, the C-suite, it refers to the people who have C it. The three letters and the first one is C, CTO, CEO, COO, CFO, Chief Financial Officer. On Squadron 40, that is taking the game from feature complete to content complete. It's the first time I've heard those two distinguished in one sentence. And the difference is basically the content complete means that all of the game assets are in their completed state. Feature complete means all the programming, all the features of the game are there, ensuring the game has necessary polish and feels worthy of being a spiritual successor to Wing Commander. So they're trying to avoid. It's a very hard thing to avoid in the current state of games, of not having to go through what is becoming known as the No Man's Sky arc. Launch, be panned, and then hopefully redeem yourself. Starfield is hoping to have a No Man's Sky arc. It's pretty clear that are more hoping to have a Baldur's Gate 3, and I hope they take that approach. I would rather have the game an extra year longer in polish so that it comes out actually polished. Really very hard to do, though, in the current environment without a large public test, which is what you want to hate to do with a single-player game. And then he hands over, which is something I don't think has ever happened in any of the other prior letters of the chairman. He actually turns things over to Benoit Bosanjour, which kind of also cements that, at least from the public-facing technology side, that he's now the number two at Cloud Imperium. Benoit Bosanjour takes credit for establishing the technology preview channel. They're charging full steam towards the launching of our first multi-server mesh in 4.0. We already have seen this in the technology preview channel. This is all new beginning of the game architecture. In the coming weeks and months, get ready for more technical preview tests of the various mesh configurations. I talked about this very recently in another video, talking about how we actually split up the individual star systems. And it looks very much like they are going with what I described as the nested attractions model. Because we're talking about layouts where servers are dedicated to entire planets and moons, others focus entirely on landing zones, and key locations with plenty of higher player count experiments. So again, planets, moons, the notion of nested servers inside of each other that I talked about in that video very much aligns with what he's saying here, okay? which makes me feel good because, as I pointed out, that's for many reasons the right way of them going about doing it. But I think the more significant thing is what's said behind the scenes here, from the fact that Chris handed it over to Benoit, and he was the first person to hand over. If you look at it, Chris could have said all these same things as himself under his own voice. But the decision was made to deliberately feature Benoit saying these things. Because remember, Chris, as the head of the organization, really, then apparently, and again, it doesn't actually say so, but judging by the use of the same background color, we are now back into Chris speaking. As we set our sights in the year ahead, the team remains focused and committed on ushering the community into uncharted territories. With the release of Pyro and Star Citizen Alpha 4.0, I cannot stress how much this is an inflection point. And I agree, this is an inflection point that we've frankly all been waiting for a long period of time. Here we get it's more obviously a corporate restructuring announcement. As part of this, towards the end of last year, we decided to reorganize the Star Citizen Squadron 42 teams to be more integrated, to facilitate bringing several years' worth of features, work, and polish into Star Citizen, and to finally set sail on Star Citizen's own finish line. So again, the important thing here is that it's their new target isn't the next beta release or next alpha release, or even going from alpha to beta, but they've changed their attitude to be more like Squadron's attitude, and that is that we are plotting for a finish line, which is good because we're 10 years in. While we recognize there is no definitive finish line on MMO, which is another interesting thing. Again, I'll get more into that. We'll be adding new features and content for many, many years to come. Star Citizen 1.0 is what we consider the features and content sent to represent a commercial release. I'm not sure exactly why a commercial is in quotes, or exactly what is the difference between a commercial in quotes and a commercial that is not in quotes. This means the game is welcoming to new players, stable and polished enough the gameplay and content to engage players continuously. In other words, no longer alpha or early access. Much like we play on with our Squadron 42's drives, the feature complete and the update content complete status, we are significant time looking at what Star Citizen 1.0 means and what it would take to get there. This is going to be an important thing, and why I think we may have a turbulent year, upon aside, going forward in terms of people's attitudes about Star Citizen. To facilitate this, I am pleased to share our very own Rich Trier will be taking on a new role of Senior Game Director, overseeing both the development of Star Citizen and Squadron 42 alongside me. Now, the me in this case, I have to presume, is Chris and not Benoit, which would be kind of unusual that someone with the title of Senior Game Director would not be reporting to the Chief Technology Officer. But Chris and Richard have been hand in hand ever since. CIG does not publish an official, to my knowledge, org chart. So it would be interesting to see where the lines are. But just from their titles, you would ordinarily see where the lines would be. The line would be from Rich to Benoit, but from his description here, it looks like the line goes from Rich to Chris, which I think here gives a bit of an indication, although I talk a little bit more later about Todd Pappy leaving, is where would Tom have fit in this mesh. And I think very likely from from the fact that Rich is right here, that they might have very wanted Todd to be under Rich, or Todd to be under Benoit. And I think perhaps Todd's hope was that all these people that used to be reporting to Rich, or that used to be reporting to Benoit, would instead now be moved to being under him. And that, from the rest of this content, clearly it wouldn't have happened, because their goal is to consider Squadron and Star Citizen as their two co-games and not separate teams, as they were for quite a while. The one team much better funded than the other. So now, Rich, and again, it's significant who they decide to give a chunk of the actual text, because they didn't have to give this information to be coming from Rich's byline. They could have had Chris say all these same things. They could have had Benoit say all these same things. So it's clearly they're wanting to familiarize even every single person. I mean, the people like us that have been following this closely, of course, knew Benoit and Rich, but they wanted all of the fans now to see a high visibility for Rich and Benoit. First, I'd like to opportunities how great it is to be back working on Star Citizen. Core gameplay pillar director. The whole title of pillars seems to have been dropped in the new organization structure. Ultimately accumulating and leaving early access and releasing the 1.0 version of the game. This begins with identifying what features and content required to create a fully realized space MMO while laying the foundations for future updates. To be 100% clear, though, this doesn't mean going back to the drawing board or totally changing the vision of what SC currently is. With this aim, Chris and I have overseen the creation of a roadmap, which we do not see, but hopefully we will be seeing, that takes us all the way up to 1.0 and outlines all the features and content we need, and just as crucially, the ones that will come post full release. Now, this is where CIG is going to be facing a trap of their own building. And I think right now, a very good thing for the community in general, and the content community specifically, content creators, is to discuss, to get some input in here on what do we need to have, what should be in that 1.0, and what doesn't need to be in that 1.0. So, for example, does refining gameplay need to be in there? Does base building have to be part of a 1.0? Does science gameplay have to be part of a 1.0? Does an improved chat system, because just to think of some of the things I've been talking about recently, does an improved chat system have to be part of a 1.0? I think at this point, if Chris and Rich are going through this, that this is a good time for us to be giving our input as to what we feel needs to be in a 1.0 release. No matter what they come up with an answer for this, it's going to be problematic, because a lot of early statements were made framed around the sentence, on release, Star Citizen will have blank. A great many of the early Kickstarter funding goals, stretch goals, were written in a phrasing of on release, Star Citizen will have. Probably the most well-known of these statements was on release, Star Citizen will have 100 star systems. Now we'll be using this as an example rather than being, so don't get the idea I'm being fixated on 100 star systems. In fact, 100 star systems was one of the things I wrote in a video titled Promises That Will Never Be Met. But calling something this is release, this is 1.0, means that the people in the fourth category, the people that are naturally want to be able to find something they can say was Star Citizen is a scam, are going to go back to every single one of those statements and is going to say, see, you said, you promised right here, Star Citizen on release will have, you're releasing it, it doesn't have it, it's a scam. Now, as I said, this is something they've been kicking the can down the road, but a lot of these things that they promised with on-release Star Citizen will have been rendered moot by advances in technology, changes in the game, new goals, all sorts of things that render old statements moot, but they've never had to admit that they were moot. And by taking a set of features and calling it, this is release, they will be inherently admitting that these things that they said were going to be in release aren't going to be in release. And so there's going to be I predict that as soon as that roadmap comes out with what is and isn't going to be there, which is why we need to be getting input on this statement. The haters, for lack of a better term, are going to pounce on it, and so we should be. There's going to be some flack flying around. Maybe even some people, agitating for class action lawsuits. That we were defrauded by not having 100-star systems, even though it wouldn't actually go anywhere. There's plenty of wiggle room if you actually read the statement that you sign in quotation marks every time you acknowledge it every time you enter the game. That says that this is things can change, or every time you purchase something, there's that long thing you have to acknowledge. And I've read it. I've really only scanned it, and I'm a stickler for details. I suspect most people have never read all those details in different. But there's going to be, I predict, a high degree of flack. I really don't want to give them almost that much credit. That pretty much crunch out the same article every year, which has changed. Star Citizen's been in development for X number of years, and now it still is in. And I think it was the reality of those articles that, and the thought that people would be writing 11 years, 12 years, 13 years, 14 years, 15 years, 16 years, as we went from Alpha 5 to Alpha 6 to Alpha 7. Most of the actual players of the game, we don't give that much care, but the bad press as that number kept on getting up, is what is pushing CIG to finally say, okay, we're gonna call this release 1, and so we can finally shut up those people that are just adding a number and writing the same article about how many years it's been and is still not there. So it's going to be exciting, and it really does open up a whole new area of things we need to actually discuss as a community. That we should get some input in here on about what, as a whole, we need to be considering should and doesn't have to be in a 1.0 title. Again, these truly are just numbers. I've considered this game fun for many years now, and that's actually why I create content. It's part of my wanting to share the journey with the rest of the backers and the fan base. So that I will wrap it up there. Again, I think the most important things about this was it was an announcement. Oh, there's also something else I wanted to point out that I felt very interesting here. As part of the reorganization, we sadly waved goodbye to the Persistent Universe Live director, Todd Pappy, which we talked about, as he has moved back to the U.S. from the U.K. last year for family reasons. Now, in corporate announcement reasons, all high-level executives leave for family reasons. I have seen people kicked out of corporations for vast incompetence, and it's always because of family reasons. They want to spend more time with their family. That the Los Angeles development team is being dispersed to everywhere else. I can sort of see this happening with Benoit Beausejour and with his new title. Los Angeles is the furthest away from Manchester, which is still technically where the corporate suite of CIG is. But it says that Chris is moving from Los Angeles to Austin, which would seem to indicate that he never actually changed his official residence from Los Angeles to Manchester, which is what they announced. I could easily see things that could have gotten in the way. And despite my previous skepticism, many of those things often are family things. Perhaps his wife and daughters didn't take to Manchester all that well. It wouldn't be surprising. Austin, if nothing else, has the similar climate to Los Angeles. And there's a lot of tax implications. In fact, from moving from Los Angeles to Austin, a lot of positive tax implications of an American citizen changing their tax nexus from California to Texas. From a personal standpoint, I moved to Austin, Texas from Los Angeles to be close to the zone of our major development operations in Manchester, Frankfurt, and Montreal. For those unfamiliar with U.S. time zones, he's actually 2 hours closer, 2 or 3, depending on whether they adopt daylight savings time, which may not seem like a much compared to the 8 hours that Los Angeles is different. But there's a significance when you are more than one when the actual normal working day doesn't have any overlap. I mean, when there's a 2-hour overlap, as it would be now, a 2 or 3 hour overlap, there's a time that you can get everybody in their office at their desk at the same time. When it's 8 hours of difference, someone has to work late or someone has to come in early, and that's the border that, depending on the time of year, Los Angeles is at compared to Manchester. So it's interesting. They're keeping a few corporate support entities, marketing, legal, and accounting. They're just keeping them in Los Angeles, which may mean that they're on many documents. They may still be listed as a Los Angeles corporation, but it's not surprising that some things you just want to keep where they originally were. Initial thoughts about this letter. The main thing it means for me personally is I'm going to be spending a lot of thought over what should and should not be for Star Citizen in that first commercial release, and also some consideration about some mental preparation for all of the flack that's going to happen when that roadmap and the statements of what is and is not going to be in 1.0 finally become public. Because there will be people, A, that will be disappointed, and B, will see this as vindication of lies, for lack of a better term. So it's going to be an interesting year in the content creator community and in the backer community in general. I'm looking forward to it. Fly safe, keep it real, and I'll see you in the verse. This is Danny Raymond for Ray's Guide.